And Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is set to be the first Japanese leader in 8 years to attend the Shangri-La Dialogue. He's headed to Singapore for the security meeting next week. Professor Haruko Satoh from the Osaka School of International Public Policy joins us live now for more on this. Professor Satoh, Mr Kishida, he's going to be the first Japanese leader to attend the Shangri-La Dialogue since 2014. So what's the significance of his attendance and why now?
I think, well, of course, this comes off the heels of US President Joe Biden's visit to Tokyo and Seoul, and also holding the Quad meeting. I think there is a concerted effort, at least if it's not explicit, but at least among the countries in Asia who participated in the Western sanction against Russia over the war in Ukraine. And so in that sense, I think this is not only timely, but probably a necessary and a very good diplomatic move by the Japanese government and, of course, by Prime Minister Kishida to actually attend. And I believe he's delivering one of the keynotes to the Shangri-La Dialogue, which, of course, is Asia's largest sort of defense and security experts and officials meeting. It's held here. So the significance, I think, is that why after 8 years? I think this is more to do with circumstance of today rather than being absent for the past 8 years and attending, because Prime Minister Abe previously had a much more sort of assertive, active diplomatic agenda, which was part of his sort of style and what he wanted to basically strike out as to demonstrate that Japan is back.
Japan certainly hasn't been absent in this part of the world, either economically or by way of security. It is seen as a regional alternative in some ways to China for Southeast Asian nations. What does his attendance, though, say about Japan's new foreign policy approach?
I'm not so sure if Japan has a new foreign policy approach per se, to the extent that Prime Minister Kishida has also advocated the free and open Indo-Pacific, which pretty much follows what Prime Minister Abe had laid down during his prime ministership, as well as when he actually started doing things in that direction in 2006 and 2007. However, I do think that one of the differences between Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Abe, and if there is a difference in the foreign policy, is that it's ideological. Prime Minister Kishida, I believe, goes back into the old pattern, rather, of being realistic, but not necessarily ideological. So he is actually doing what is perhaps expected of Japan as a G7 country, as well as the allies to the United States, as well as a somewhat of a, yes, as you say, an alternative, perhaps force for stability in this region. I don't really want to sort of pit Japan always in that sort of rivalry with China. But yes, I think that's more of the significance rather than something new. It's just.
You mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that you felt Ukraine was going to feature heavily. There will be points on that at the Shangri-La Dialogue. It certainly is something that Fumio Kishida has talked about as well. Biden has said it's got to be a diplomatic solution to this. What do you think leaders are going to do or say, perhaps, at this dialogue to move towards the end of this war?
I'm not sure what the leaders can talk about in terms of ending this conflict, because essentially although it has global implications and delicate situations are developing, in some ways polarizing situations developing even in Asia. However, it is probably more of thinking about one of the things is really to stop the polarization of the other, say, Asian countries or other countries around the world, which are not necessarily, for example, party to the conflict, but are affected by the sort of the great power struggle that's happening between the United States, Russia, and to some extent China and India.
Professor Satoh,
yep.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Haruko Satoh there from the Osaka School of International Public Policy.